Hello, welcome everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes for everyone to log on before kicking things off. In the meantime, why don't you let us all know where you're tuning in from in the chat box. We'd love to see the breadth across Australia of rail organisations and individuals getting involved in today's webinar. I can see we've got people from Broken Hill, the Department of Transport in Victoria. I had the pleasure of attending a webinar with DOT this morning. Litchfield in Northern Victoria. We've got quite some good representation. Oh, we've got someone internationally from Alberta, Canada. Welcome, Miles. I myself am tuning in from Sydney, and I've got two colleagues joining me as well. So while today's webinar will be for the rail industry, for those of you who work in another industry, hopefully you'll get some tips from the conversation that we have about when and how to support a workmate who's going through a tough time. Beautiful. So thank you everyone who's joined us today. Welcome to the live Q&A. Today is the 7th Rail Are You OK Day, which is a national day that encourages everyone across the rail industry in Australia and New Zealand to support their peers and have Are You OK conversations whenever they notice the signs that someone might be struggling with life. So Rail Are You OK Day is a collaboration between Are You OK and the TrackSafe Foundation. And we're going to post a link to the TrackSafe Foundation website where you can learn more about Rail Are You OK Day. You can access the initiative's free resources, which include a conversation guide, conversation bingo, presentation kit, and champions toolkit in the chat box. So look out for that link and please do look at those resources. And we do encourage everyone to get involved in today's discussion in the chat box. And in fact, I've got two of my Are You OK colleagues, Rebecca and James, who'll be answering questions and asking our audience members some questions too, so that we all take something away from today's session. But I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we all meet and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So who am I? I'm your host, Anastasia Simmons. I'm the brand and marketing manager for Are You OK? But today I am joined by a fantastic guest. Our guest for this live Q&A is Jules Robinson, who's a wellness specialist at Metro Trains Melbourne and a long-term champion of Rail Are You OK Day. Thanks for joining us, Jules, and for sharing your insights with us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
So today's session, we'll be talking about when and how to support a workmate who might be struggling with life. But before we kick off the formal Q&A, we urge anyone who is dealing with tough emotions or uncomfortable feelings to reach out to someone they trust or an appropriate health professional for support. If you need immediate crisis or emotional support, Lifeline are available 24/7 on 131114. This is an Australia only service, and we'll post their details in the chat box. We're going to be answering some questions from the audience at the conclusion of our formal Q&A today. And you can post them in the chat or in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screens. So while we may not be able to take all questions during this Q&A, if we don't get to yours, we'll aim to respond in future communications. And Jules and I also just wanted to let everyone know up front that there are some topics that we won't be covering in today's session. We're really mindful that sensitive topics can trigger strong reactions and emotions for people, and we want to minimize this where we can. However, if you ask a question that we can't answer in this public forum, we will follow up with you afterwards. And so for these questions, my colleagues, Rebecca and James, may respond privately to you so that we can get a contact email. And I also want to acknowledge everyone in the room who may be struggling. If you are struggling or going through a tough time, we do hope that today is the day you reach out for support by talking to someone you trust or connecting with help. I also want to acknowledge everyone in the room who's lost a loved one to suicide. Our hearts and thoughts are with you. So now to the formal Q&A. Jules, our first question is all about you. So you're a wellness specialist and you've been a long supporter of the Are You OK message. What role do you think peer-to-peer support, which really is at the core of the Are You OK message, plays in creating a workplace culture where everyone feels safe, supported, and encouraged?
Yep, thanks, Anastasia. So peer support and supporting our workmates and, taking that time to reach out to them when we notice they're just not themselves, it's so important, and I really can't stress that enough. Look, I mean, when we think about it, our work colleagues, these are the ones that we see day in, day out, and are normally onto us, if they feel that we're acting a bit different to our normal selves. So it's our workmates that are in a position to make the call and to reach out to us. And when we feel that our workmates care about us, of course, that makes us feel supported, and that in turn can really help us get the support that we need. So at Metro Trains, we're really lucky because we've got a formal peer support network, which is over 200 employees, and they're trained in mental health first aid. These employees, they have that training to provide our employees with that low-level psychological support, and then they tie our employees into support services such as our EAP, external sources as well, such as Lifeline, GPs and so forth. So at the end of the day, the culture of a workplace is represented by the well-being of its people. And, if we work in an area that we feel supported, then we know that if we hit any hiccups, everything's going to be okay, it's a mindset that we all want to have at our work. And ideally, this is the kind of workplace everyone wants to work at, as it makes us feel like there's hope. And I guess it makes us feel more confident during those vulnerable times. Also, I guess what I've noticed is that when we see our leaders, when we see our leaders project outwardly these supporting behaviours and taking that time to know more about mental health, this tends to filter down to other employees, and it starts off, a bit of a social contagion where our leaders model that help-seeking kind of behaviours. That's where the culture change really starts. We also have at Metro Trains wellness advocates. These are champions who volunteer their time to arrange mental health awareness events and initiatives such as Are You OK each year. So these are those grassroots active role models who raise awareness and make things happen locally. And that can be, from health checks to educational programs on a range of health and wellbeing topics. So these guys are the champions of mental health awareness and really the culture change from the ground upwards.
Jules, there's such practical examples of, how Metro Trains are really building that culture where everyone feels safe, encouraged and supported. And I really love that the examples that you drew on had both informal examples, so what everyone in the workplace can do, as well as those structured layers of support, and how everyone from the bottom up is getting involved in this initiative and really championing that culture of change. So Rail Are You OK Day forms part of that culture that you're building. And what it really focuses on is encouraging workmates to reach out and ask, are you okay, whenever they notice signs or changes in a colleague. Why do you think are you okay conversations are important in the workplace?
Yeah, right. So these conversations are so important because, it's hard to know how someone is really going and where they're at unless we have this conversation. And also it's really important that we get in early with these conversations too, so that they don't snowball into a much larger issue. And I guess early intervention is what I'm trying to say is the key. Also, it's much easier to get better if we get to it early. Left longer, and it can take a whole lot longer to treat as things get bigger and, as I said, snowball. So, we all get busy or stuck from time to time in our own heads, and we tend to fail to notice how someone may be struggling around us. And I guess this stops us from reaching out to others that may really need some help. Or we might even notice that we're stuck a little ourselves. And this means we can't look after others when we're not well. So life throws, some lemons from time to time, and that's really the nature of life with ups and downs. However, having someone there that we feel's got our back, so to say, can make these life events more bearable and also really make us more resilient. I know the power of conversation and how reaching out to others can make a big positive impact and support someone that's really struggling. And it can trigger them into reaching out, which is what we want. In my personal life, I guess I do the same and have had these conversations, with family members countless times. The nature of mental illness is that it can make people feel really lonely and really helpless. But the simple act of someone reaching out can totally change the dynamic and encourage someone, that there really is hope. And things can get better with the right help and some good advice and some tools under your belt. So the reality is that there really isn't nothing that can't be fixed with the right coaching. The great thing about the annual Are You OK campaign is that it really is a reminder to everyone to be more mindful of themselves as well as others, and get into that habit of reaching out and asking that simple question to our workmates.
I really like what you covered there, Jules, particularly that point about, not waiting until someone's in crisis to reach out and have these conversations and to send that message of support to people, to take that time to check in with yourself and those around you every single day of the year. And so this day really is about encouraging and empowering people to have those conversations, because what Are You OK's research has shown us time and time again is that when someone is asked the question, when that supportive conversation happens, people do feel more connected, they do feel more hopeful, and they are more likely to know where they could go for support and what next steps they might be able to take, which is so important when we're sending this message of hope to someone who is going through a tough time. And I want to dive into one of those points a little bit more, Jules, and that is about those times and those moments when someone might need to be asked, "Are you okay?" What do you think are some of the signs and moments that it might be time to start a conversation with someone that you work with?
Yeah, so Alexandra, that's a good question. And it's really great. I feel that we're starting to get better at asking that question. And after that 7 years of focused mental health campaigning at Metro, I can say that I've seen a big change in the way that we operate when it comes to mental health awareness. So I guess getting back to the question, it won't always be obvious when someone's not doing well, but there are some signs and changes that you can look out for that might signal they do need that little bit of extra support. Some of these can be more obvious. For example, something that that's gone on in their life, such as the illness or injury. It could be a marriage breakup or financial stress. And then it could be their behaviour has changed, so from how they normally are. So they may be snappy or really moody or defensive, which is out of character. That you could notice that they're acting differently than they normally would. For example, withdrawal from social events, if they're normally a very sociable kind of person, active person. So it's losing that kind of interest in something that normally they would really love to do. And I guess lastly, there's if you actually hear them saying something like they feel like they're a burden, they might be in a cycle of worry. You might notice that they're lacking in self-esteem or feeling like they don't fit in it anymore. So I guess it could be a couple of things or many of the things that I've mentioned, but I guess ultimately it's when we pick up and we get that gut feeling that something just isn't right with them. So the gut feeling, I feel like it's something that, we need to get more in tune with and need to trust it a little bit more. So trusting your intuition is important, and I feel like we need to pay more attention to that.
I couldn't agree more, Jules. Trusting that gut feeling is so important, because what healthy and well is and what normal is different for absolutely everyone. Some people might get louder, some people might get more quieter. And so while there are things that we can keep an eye on, those verbal cues in what someone's saying, those physical signs in what someone's doing, and those moments in life, what's going on that could really challenge someone, it is really important to tune into that gut feeling. And something else that I think that's really important, and Are You OK certainly encourages people to do, is to have those open conversations amongst one another about what your own signs are. So, what is it that you start to do when things are getting a little bit tougher for you? Is it that you start to withdraw a bit more? Is it that you'll respond to things in a particular way? If we have these conversations when we're well with people and let them know what to look out for, it really creates that environment where we're all able to check in with one another and go, right, I remember when you said that when you start to do this, that can be an indicator that you might need some extra support. Just wanted to check in and see how things are going. And it can be a really nice way to get those conversations flowing and started, and to get people to really start thinking about, what their own personal signs are as well. So I guess that leads us to what comes next after you've spotted the signs that someone might be struggling. And that really is an "Are you okay?" conversation. But before you dive into that conversation, there's some preparation that needs to happen. What are 3 things, Jules, that you think people should consider prior to reaching out to someone?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, it's not just about asking the question, it's about making sure that you're equipped to have that conversation. So there's some simple steps, and the first one is about being ready for the conversation. So this means that you need to be in a good headspace yourself. You need to have the actual time to listen with no distractions. You can't be stressing out while you're trying to support somebody else. That just doesn't work. The next one is you need to feel prepared. So you need to do a little bit of research, maybe look into your workplace EAP and, get familiar with what they offer. How many sessions are for free? Are they unlimited? Have a look at the Beyond Blue or Lifeline websites. So you can also refer to them there. But I guess you also really just need to remember that you're not going to have all the questions, and that's okay. And then lastly, it's about picking up that right moment, where it's private, people aren't coming and going, they're able to chat, so you can chat uninterrupted. So that's really important. It's about creating that safe space where someone's more likely to open up to you.
Which is the ultimate goal. You want someone to feel like they can really be vulnerable with you in that moment. And if you aren't the right person for that, for whatever reason, that's okay. What can really help is to consider who else might be in their network of support that could reach out to them, and to just make that subtle suggestion of, have you thought about checking in with so-and-so, might be good to do at this time. And then that can be just a nice way of ensuring that someone does have that conversation who is in the right position and place. And then I guess the only other thing that I would encourage people to consider in the workplace, particularly those in a management position, is to just make sure that you uncouple performance-related conversations from those where you're genuinely checking in about someone's emotional well-being and welfare, to really consider how you're going to separate those particular approaches so that you do give someone, that space to open up and really share what's going on for them as well. And so that's why the resources that have been put together for Rail Are You OK Day are so important. They do include a conversation guide, which provides some tips and pointers on how to do this. And indeed some more information on how to actually have that conversation, which leads me to my next question for you, Jules. What are your tips once you're sitting down face to face with someone and you're asking that important question, are you okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's not easy, but when you've got some tips on hand, it certainly does make all the difference. So to open the conversation, like I just touched on, I would say, the private area, and to do it in a relaxed way. So open that convo with something like, I've noticed that you've been less chatty than usual. So don't make a big deal about it. Keep it kind of low key. It's also really about listening. Listening is really important. I think that these days we're a bit poor in that area. We've got so much going on and our lives are so busy. But I think listening with full attention, just trying not to rush a conversation and giving them that space to talk, and for you to have that open mind. So I would also encourage them to at least think of one simple step that they can take. It's a positive step that they can take to encourage some kind of action. For example, they may say something like, maybe I'll make an appointment with my GP. So you can encourage them to do that. And while you've got them there, it's a perfect time to ask them if they mind that you check in with them again. So this just, keeps you looped in, and it helps keep that conversation kind of open and going with them.
I love these practical tips that you've given, Jules, and they match so well with the message of this year's Rail Are You Okay Day, which is follow that train of thought. There's more to say after Are You Okay? Because when someone starts to open up and say that they are struggling, things aren't going so well, after you've kind of eased into it with that, that opener indicating what you've noticed, it is really important to keep that conversation going. And an element of that is listening and providing moments for someone to open up and share your story. I just wanted to dive into that particular step of Are You OK's conversation process a bit more. Why do you think listening with an open mind is such an important part of these kinds of conversations?
Yeah, look, I guess what it means is that you're recognizing people for the individuals that they are. We need to remind ourselves that, everyone's so different, everyone has different views. So what they're going through is deeply personal, and, it might be a topic that you really don't have any clue, you know nothing about it. So it's really about just being there for them in that single moment. So again, listening without judging. Quite difficult to do, but you get better with practice. And understanding that sometimes it's more about patiently listening to the other person and just hearing them out.
And I think, that it's not something that comes naturally to absolutely everyone. I know that I'm a personality who loves a solution to a problem, love to be able to go, right, we've got this, we're going to dive straight to that encourage action step and tackle things. And so it's important to understand, how you might react in that listening step as well, to think about how you slow yourself down to give someone the space. And one of the tips that I heard last year was sometimes if you put your finger on your lips, it's a good reminder to your brain if they're moving just that little bit too much during one of these conversations. And of course, always trying to, ask open questions of that person so that you're giving them permission to continue to share their story and giving them that indication that you do care and you want to hear the full answer and not just that surface level kind of chit chat as well. So often when you are asking those open questions and someone's opening up, you can get a real feel for what's going on in their life and how they're feeling. And sometimes they will need some extra support. So what, Jules, in your perspective or in your opinion, are some of the support services that a rail worker might be able to access for additional support that we can perhaps suggest or put forward in one of these conversations?
Yeah, sure. So I guess in terms of support systems, I would provide information on EAP, dependent on the situation, of course. So EAP, for anyone that may not know, it's an employee assist program which supports employees and offers counselling for those that require it. And it could be for work or it could be for personal reasons where someone needs support. So at Metro Trains, our EAP provides free counselling by a qualified psychologist, and it is 100% confidential, which means, it's a high level psychological support for those people that need it. There still is, unfortunately, a stigma attached to reaching out to EAP. However, I feel that over the years, I feel like this is improving as people are coming around and realising that it is actually against regulations for organisations to store this personal data. So we can rest assured knowing that it is totally confidential. So at Metro, we're lucky as we also have access to, as part of our EAP, we have some wellbeing coaching available to all staff. So wellbeing coaching is about reaching those that are doing okay, but they just want to get into that thriving space, so being at their best personally. So this coaching program, it focuses on making positive improvements. For example, if someone wants to set some goals, whether they're career related, could be, shed a few kilos, get some career advice, and a whole lot of other things. But other than that, in terms of support, I guess I would mention to chat to your manager if you do feel comfortable. And if you do have peer supporters, have a chat to them, or otherwise I would suggest HR or your health and wellbeing team.
There's such fantastic examples of what may be available to people in their workforce. And I really love that example of the wellness program because, so often in our head, we think that the only action we can encourage is kind of professional related. It's a visit to the doctor or a chat with your psychologist. But sometimes what people might need is to, make a bit more time for something that they love or that brings them joy, to kind of find that space and time to relax. And take time out to think about the other supports and people that they can call upon, or indeed practical things like someone to help out with the shopping or, managing the kids on the weekend or whatever it might be. So it's really important, when you're at this step to, yes, think about, the pointy end, if that's what someone does need, but to also think about the other things that may help someone, manage their situation and what's going on in their life at the time as well. If you don't have supports available within your workplace, a good first point of call for that kind of pointy end is potentially your local doctor and having a conversation with them about what's available in your local area. And you can also find a directory of national support services on the Are You OK website at ruok.org.au/find help. And my lovely colleagues, Rebecca and James, will post a link to that in the chat box as well. So what we do know is that there are lots of resources for managers and staff in the rail industry available on the TrackSafe website, things like the conversation guide. What would you recommend for anyone who is unsure about when or how to ask Are You OK to do?
Okay, so I guess what comes to mind straight away for me here is the fantastic handbook that our CEO Raymond provided to all staff on the first day of April. So at Metro, let me explain that we follow the Rail Are You OK campaign, not just the one official day, which is today, but we do it for the whole month of April. So this is our 7th year now since inception, and I'm so proud of the fact that it's such a big month for us at Metro. So our frontline employees really get into it each year and run with it, which is always so awesome to see and to be part of. So I guess this April we focused on digging a little deeper, I guess. So not just running around asking people, are they okay? And not knowing how to respond when someone does say they're not okay. So I guess we're trying to educate our employees on how to set up those conversations and manage those tricky conversations, that we're not always prepared for. So on the 1st of April, so Raymond sent out that How to Ask handbook, which it's like a little booklet, and you can print it out or you can save it onto your desktop to refer to when you need it. It really it just explains how to ask these hairy questions, with some awesome tips that you can pick up. So what I will do is I'll recommend everyone goes onto your TrackSafe website and downloads the booklet and, sends it on to their teams so that they can refer to it. And it's a really good reference tool. There's also, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, so it really is, about people educating themselves and taking that responsibility to sit with the resources and try and take that information on board.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also lots of info on there that I'm constantly referring to. So there's posters that our wellness advocates post up around the business throughout April, raising awareness. And there's also info on there if you want to buy some merchandise to make more impact at your work site. So I'm such a visual person, so seeing that yellow each year has become really important to me, and it makes me feel, like we've come a really long way in our journey from pretty humble beginnings.
A couple of other resources that I really love are on the Are You OK website. So we've got something like a conversation role play. So if you're a little bit nervous about asking someone how they're going, utilizing that role play gives you a chance to test out a couple of things that you might say during the conversation and a scenario where someone, is responding to those comments in real time as well. So I encourage you to check that out on the How to Ask page on the Are You OK website. And I'll get my colleagues to post a link to that page in the chat box now as well. So my final question for our formal Q&A today, Jules, is Rail Are You OK Day. We're in our 7th Rail Are You OK Day, and as you said, you've been here on the journey with us. Why do you think this day of action is so important, and what impact have you seen the initiative make in your work in the industry over the last 7 years?
Yeah, so look, working in the health and wellbeing team myself, I can say that, look, 7 years ago, I was never, ever approached by a colleague saying that they'd like to share their story or journey, with mental health. However, in the last 3 years in particular, there's been a massive turnaround that I've seen. We have over these past years, used the last 3 years, lots of local ambassadors, which are our own Metro employees. And they come to me and they ask if they can speak at our internal events, and, they actually want to share what they've been through. So some of them have told me that it's part of their own healing process and they want to help others that might be going through something similar. I guess this gives them new meaning to their own struggles, and they can see it as a calling to themselves and others as they've been through it, so they understand and they truly know how rough it can get and that helplessness that goes with it. Our employees, they always connect to these personal stories and it really hits close to home. I think people see it as, it's one of our own. And, over the years, I've seen crowds of tears at numerous events, as we're all human and we all feel the same emotions, and these, these war stories are something that we're drawn to. I think I kind of feel like we see a fragment of ourselves in them, even if it's just for that fleeting second. It's the honesty, the rawness, and the oneness that we feel when others put their hearts on the line to share their personal stories so bravely. And they make themselves vulnerable, and that's not an easy thing to do either. So the fact that our people are really engaged in Rail Are You OK month at Metro, and then it's become so big over the years. In fact, this year we've had over 30 separate events happen over our network. Back in the day, I remember we started off with probably only a couple of events, and now it's so great to see how it's matured and how people connect with it and really run with it. So the secret recipe to why it's so successful at Metro is because we have 115 wellness advocates. And like I mentioned before, these guys volunteer on top of their roles to promote Rail Are You OK month every year. And these guys work tirelessly and they really put their heart and soul into keeping it fresh, year upon year. So I feel so grateful to work with such an inspirational team who organise these events. It could be mental health speakers, internal, external, it could be barbecues, morning teas. We even had a mindful craft session yesterday, so each year there's these fantastic ideas they come up with, and it's really fantastic to be part of it. So again, there's that sea of yellow that we love, and we communicate Rail Are You OK heavily internally to get the message out to our people. Also the fact, as I did mention, that we follow the campaign for a whole month and not just the one day, shows our loyalty to the campaign, and it really connects our people into each other each year. And this gives our wellness advocates having more time, means that we can embed it even more so. And it gives our wellness advocates more time and flexibility, to spread out the events across the 4 weeks.
I really find that, these examples that you've given us so inspiring. And the kind of things that I've taken from what you've said, Jules, are the importance of, finding those genuine advocates, those people within the organisation who are committed to sharing the Are You OK message, to promoting mental health and wellbeing, and driving this culture. And so they can be in all kinds of different roles. And so when you find these genuine advocates, giving them that ownership, giving them that buy-in, that ability to, to take the message and adapt it for their team, for their setting, is absolutely important. And to anyone who isn't quite there yet, they're not quite at the Metro level, the one thing that I will say to you is that change in attitudes, change in culture, change in behaviour does take time. And so while Metro has been on the journey for 7 years, for those of you that are just starting out, we encourage you to just get started, try something this year, and then continue to evaluate, see what you can do next year to kind of grow it and take it further, whether that's extending it from 1 day to a week, and then eventually in a couple of years' time, perhaps to the month, like Jules and the team at Metro are doing. And there's wonderful resources on the TrackSafe website which can help you do this. They've got practical tips and ideas on what you can do to start creating that culture of support, and also on finding those people within your organisation who would be genuine advocates for the cause as well. And then the other thing that I thought was really powerful in what you just said, Jules, was the importance of storytelling, giving people with lived experience, that platform to share. Because when someone shares their experiences, when someone talks about the real difference that, a conversation is made, or that seeking support is made, or that the change in culture is made, it starts to really bring home to people that this isn't just about slogans. It's not just about messaging. It's about people at the end of the day, and the difference that we can all make, every single one of us, in the role we all play, in making sure that our colleagues feel safe, they feel supported, they feel encouraged, and they feel like they can say, you know what, things aren't great, I need a bit of help, and put their hand out for support and know that someone's going to be there.
Absolutely. It's been so nice for me to see, that change at Metro, whereas we've never had people reaching out to us before, and now it happens quite often. So to see that change, getting back to the culture, that tells me that the culture is changing. Yeah, we're not perfect as yet, of course, but, there's more work to do there. However, there's been a lot of improvement.
And I think that kind of brings me to one of the questions that's come through from the audience. And that is about, so, you get lots of people across the organisation involved in supporting this message and supporting the activity. And sometimes, it can take a bit of a toll. There can sometimes be some burnout and compassion fatigue. How do you deal with burnout and compassion fatigue at Metro?
Yeah, look, absolutely. It can get draining on us, mentally, and then it can affect us physically when it comes to that compassion fatigue. So here is where my role as a wellness specialist kicks in, and what I recommend to our people is self-care. So taking time out for ourselves, and a really good model to follow is the 5 Ways to Wellbeing model. So if people in the audience want to Google 5 Ways to Wellbeing, that 5 Ways to Wellbeing, that will take you through the 5 pillars of wellbeing. So from memory, it's connect, be active, keep learning, and there's give as well. So there's science and research that's gone into creating these 5 pillars, and says that if we tap into one of those or more of those pillars, our resilience and well-being increases. So what I would suggest is to do some research and look into that, and be proactive and look after yourself, because like I mentioned earlier, if you don't look after yourself, you just can't look after anybody else, because you're just not in the right mindset.
That self-care is so important. And I think, having some processes in place, if you are rolling out Rail Are You OK Day in your workplace, can really help. Things like having an option for people to debrief some of these difficult conversations, and to just talk through, if things are weighing on their mind after reaching out and supporting their colleagues, can be really, really important. If that isn't an option for you in your workplace, a number of the mental health helplines that are available nationally can also be used by people who are helping others, so that you can talk to them about the conversations you've had, what's weighing on your mind, and just to debrief that situation. And other things that are really important is to just keep checking in with yourself. The lights have gone out in my room. To just keep checking in with yourself while you're checking in with others. So to keep an eye on those signs within yourself that that things might be becoming a bit tough, and to, of course, ask for help if you do need it as well.
That's right.
My final question for today, and we'll wrap things up straight after this, is about something that's become more prevalent in this kind of new post-COVID-19 environment, which is that a lot more people are working virtually, remotely, or have limited physical contact. What are some tips for encouraging connection, support, and conversations amongst workers who are working virtually, remotely, or do have that limited physical contact?
Yeah, well, I guess we certainly have had a time to practice this in our reality, day-to-day lives, due to COVID lockdowns and social distancing this past 12 months. Look, at Metro, we had regular team meetings at the beginning of COVID, and they were daily to begin with, but they ended up being weekly, so that's virtual like this. And they eased up as we felt people kind of settled into their new working from home routines. So I guess, we were forced to get good at operating online and learning new skills and maybe getting out of our comfort zones a little, which is a good thing for us, as we know that learning is good for our well-being. But so I guess tips to reach out to your teammates if they haven't shown up to meetings or online meetings, and making sure that you connect into them to see what's going on and how they're doing. So it is really about making that effort to connect and really just keeping it front of mind. We're all so busy, but I guess it's about just being a bit more mindful about that. For example, with Metro's Wellness Advocates, I started a weekly coffee chat with them at the beginning of COVID, which meant we didn't necessarily need to talk about work. Sometimes we did, but most of the time it was just about touching base with each other and spending time with each other. Let's face it, there is nothing better than that face-to-face, but when we're thrown into this new world of social distancing as part of the epidemic, we just do what we can, I guess, and that shouldn't stop us from picking up the phone or arranging some virtual catch-ups. So some teams at Metro even did some fun initiatives. They did some online games, like a weekly or fortnightly kind of games lunch session, such as, I think, Pictionary, categories, just to lighten the mood and connect in with each other and give it a bit of a fun spin. So I think it's also about kind of getting creative and trying something different, but reaching out in a way that's comfortable with you, of course.
And it is so important to still create those incidental moments of connection in any way you can. We heard a really brilliant example last week on another webinar from a workplace where they kind of started in their team meeting doing getting everyone to talk about how they were feeling on a rating scale from 1 to 10. And at the beginning, when they first started to do it, everyone would talk about workloads and how they were feeling in terms of deadlines and that kind of work pressure. But slowly over time, people began to start to realize that 1 to 10 scale wasn't just about what was on your to-do list at work. It was also about how you were going in general. And people started to open up and say, you know what, things are a little bit harder this week. I've got a sick kid or something else is going on in my life. And it created those moments for people to be vulnerable, to share, which perhaps wouldn't have happened in this kind of COVID-19 environment otherwise. On the fun side, as part of the Rail Are You OK Day assets this year, we've put together a conversation bingo and a chat Are You OK Let, which is all about stimulating conversations and getting people talking and meeting one another in that virtual and remote working environment as well. So I encourage you to go and check those out if you can, which would be amazing. So that does conclude our formal Q&A. I really want to thank Jules for being so generous with your insights today, for sharing so many practical tips and examples of what's happening in the Metro workplace and on what we can all do as individuals to support our workmates when they're going through it.
You're welcome. I hope people can take something away. Definitely.
And so what we'll be doing, if we can get to your question, we'll follow up with you in the coming days, and our moderators would have reached out to you for your contact email details as well. And if you are looking for more information and resources, please do check out the Rail Are You OK Day page on the Trackside website, and you can find more tips, tools and resources on the Are You OK website as well. And finally, if today's Q&A has brought up tough emotions or complex feelings for you, or you just need a little bit of extra support, we do hope that today is the day that you reach out for help. And remember that Lifeline is available 24/7 on 131114. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of Rail Are You OK Day and have a fantastic afternoon. Here's to Jules.
Thanks, everyone. See you.